Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and helps you live a more vibrant second half. If you find us on YouTube today, please don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss any more of these amazing conversations. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, please remember to subscribe, rate, and share these conversations. Today, friends, we're going to be talking about an age-old thing that us women think about, and that is our bodies and our health. You know, why is our health the most important thing? My guest today wants us to understand that health is the most important thing we have. It's not about the number on the scale. It is so much more than that. My guest today is Rachel Freiman. She is the CEO of Mindstrong Fitness, and she is the author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Becoming Mindstrong: The Truth About Health, Fitness, and the BS That's Holding You Back. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
My pleasure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why this mission and message? How did you get into this passion for fitness?
Yeah, my background is an odd one. My background actually has nothing to do with health and fitness. I was a musician for most of my life. I was a jazz musician, did all of school, all of college, all of my master's degree in music, and eventually went on after years of freelancing to become a teacher. I was teaching middle school music. And if you've ever worked with children or have children or been around a child, you know that it is very rewarding, but very exhausting work. So I just needed something that was my own outlet at the end of the day. And I had some friends who were active in the gym. So it very much just started as an organic hobby. Let me try this thing out and see if I like it. And what I found, as most of us have experienced, is the more I got into this world of trying to get healthy, of trying to lose a few pounds, of trying to grow some muscles, the more I learned, the more confused I got. Because this was an industry just filled with really good marketing and a whole lot of BS. And I didn't understand that at first. So the more I got my hands in the dirt and started to educate myself, the teacher in me, I always say I wanted to shout from the rooftops, like, holy cow, nutrition especially does not have to be this big, overwhelming subject. You know, someone could teach you to knit, someone could teach you to surf. You can teach nutrition as a skill. And it was this very defining moment of my career and of my life in a lot of ways where I loved teaching. I did not want to leave that field. And I knew that the health and fitness industry did not need another personal trainer, but what it did need was an educator. And that's what, to this day, what I consider myself. I will never consider myself a coach or a trainer. I'm an educator in the field of health and fitness, doing something completely different than what most of this industry is designed. My favorite joke is I have the worst sales pitch in the world because you only need me once. Because once you have an education in something, you're in complete control and you'll literally never go on a diet again.
That's fantastic. Now, we talked about before we hit record, just the baseline of health and how important that is, and how the older we get, the more amplified that truth becomes, right? Now, I have had conversations before when we talk about, health and hormones and everything is, we have been drawing from a bank. A lot of people are less inclined to maybe make good choices with their bodies when they're younger because you're invincible, right? You're going to live forever. And so you're not thinking, I got to make this baby last for 80, 90 years, right? But we hit this middle ground in middle age and our bodies start to change with hormones, stress, all these things. And then health becomes a completely different conversation. And I'd love to talk about your perspective on how that health line base, how that fitness base needs to shift, or what it is we can do. Because I think there is a shift up in our minds, because when we're 20, we're trying to look like the hottest thing on the beach, right? Or we feel pressure to, at least. And maybe we do in our mid 50s. I think it is kind of out there. There's a lot of Instagram models in my age group that are still looking tiny, which I'm 5'11" and never really been tiny. But I think this mindset, and the reason I'm bringing this up, is part of that feminine ideal that we have wrestled with our whole life. So let's go from your perspective, this idea of fitness as a baseline. What is health and how we can shift the mindset so that we are actually approaching it in a more appropriate and helpful way for us?
Yeah, I love that you use the word baseline, because in my mind, every time I talk about the importance of health, the importance of fitness, I think of it as a pyramid. If the top of this pyramid is that we want to live a life in alignment, we want to live our most empowered, unleashed, choose your word, our best life. If we're going to call that the top of the pyramid, the middle part of the pyramid is all about our mindset, our inner monologue, the stories we're telling ourselves, our limiting beliefs. And the foundation, that baseline of the pyramid, has to be your physical health. And there's a very scientific reason for this. And I'm going to emphasize the word scientific, because when I start talking about energy and attraction, it's very easy to tune out and be like, oh, she's talking woo-woo stuff. But to me, nothing about attracting back is woo-woo. It's quantum physics. So there's a law of quantum physics of energy that says like attracts like. In music travels in sound waves, right? It's energy, and pitches attract pitches, because like attracts like when it comes to energy. So when we understand that concept, that like attracts like, and then we understand, if we think back to our elementary school days, and that was further away for some of us than others, but we're going to go back for a second. When we think about learning about atoms, right? Atoms are the building block of everything in the world, which means you're made of atoms, I'm made of atoms, the chair we're sitting on is made of atoms. But what science has discovered is that, yes, an atom has all those parts we learned about in school, the nucleus, the protons, the electrons. But an atom, the building block of everything, is actually 99.9999% energy. So if that you really let that sink in, it's kind of incredible, because it means everything in the world, including you and I, are vibrating energy. Now, things vibrate at different speeds, right? It's why we don't fall through our chair, but we are all walking around as vibrating energy. So when we combine those two understandings, that when it comes to energy, like attracts like, and we as humans are vibrating energy according to quantum physics, according to science, it is a truth of life that when we talk about attracting back, that's not rainbows and glitter and unicorns, that's quantum physics. So if we're walking around in a day and we're sitting there thinking, oh, I shouldn't have sniffed pizza last night, now I feel like I gained 5 pounds, right? I should have gone to the gym, I shouldn't have eaten this. We're walking around in the world shrunken down, right? We're in our heads, we're beating ourselves up, we are shrunken down in our skin. And that is the life we are quite literally attracting back. So when we start taking the steps to get our health in check, it does not matter. This is not about wearing a t-shirt that says I lost 20 pounds, right? Nobody's wearing a t-shirt that says this is how much I weigh. It's about the energy that we're putting out into the world. Because before we've even lost a pound, when we just start taking the steps, we start standing up taller, we start feeling more confident in our skin. And it's no coincidence that as we start doing this work, we start attracting back a very different life, right? We watch people step into the jobs of their dreams, leaving unhealthy relationships, finding partners they've been looking for. And to me, that's quantum physics. So if we want to truly live a life in alignment in our most empowered life, that baseline, as you put it so beautifully, has to start with our physical health.
I think it can be challenging, because the stories that I've heard are like, I've never been an athlete. I'm not athletic, right? I've never played sports. So let's talk a little bit about what you're talking about. When we talk about health and fitness, a lot of people literally categorize it like, well, since I never played sports, I'm therefore not interested, not capable of working out. Like it's this animal outside of ourselves. And this idea of energy is, if I think I don't like something, like attract likes, I am not going to like it, right?
Very true. Very true. The saving grace here, I primarily work with women aged 40 to 60. So by that stage of life, we have some very deep rooted, when we understand neuroscience and beliefs, these are literally deeply wired in belief systems, exactly as you're saying about what we like and what we don't like. Most of the women that we work with in that age group, well, every once in a while we get an outlier, but most of them come in with this belief of, I'm scared to lift weights. That's a boy activity, right? We go to the gym, we see sweaty grunting men, and we don't want to go there. I'm going to injure myself. The beautiful part when it comes to your health, those are two very separate topics. Health and fitness are two very separate topics. You can 100% do this with nutrition alone. Nutrition is 90% of this game. So when I have someone come to us and they're like, I don't know where to start, I'm overwhelmed, I feel like I always red flag the word should. I should be working out, but I hate it. The answer is we're not even going to touch that. We're going to start with nutrition alone, because human beings, Freud discovered something called the pleasure principle. We are designed to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So when we try to do these major life overhauls of like, okay, new way of nutrition, working out 5 days a week, no more couch potato, like the whole shebang, we're never going to stick with it. I call that pushing a boulder up a hill, right? It's never going to last and it's going to be really, really difficult. But when we start with just nutrition, because we're pleasure seeking creatures, at some point organically, we don't have to force this. We're going to say, wow, I'm feeling really good. And as a pleasure seeking creature, we're not going to say, I feel really good. Let me not do anything else, right? We're going to say, I feel really good. What else can I do? And at that point, we play a game called do the bare minimum, where it's like, you know what? Let me do 2 exercises twice a week. I'm not going to go 4 days a week to the gym. I'm not going to do an hour-long workout. I'm going to dip my toe in the water. And now we become a snowball going down a hill. And we don't even have to think about that part yet. Because when you start with nutrition, not only will you get results, but that's the start of the snowball going down the hill. That's how we start to get momentum.
You know, you're talking about how starting small and not going too far too fast. I think it's interesting because I would think you would find people, back to the mindset thing, the fear coming in, even with changes in our food, because food is such a comfort thing at this point in our life, you know? And I like how you say that one little change, your body will tell you. And that's the thing that I've noticed is we don't always know what our body is telling us. And that seems to be a pivotal thing. Would you agree that it's a pivotal thing to make a small change and then learn to listen to how you actually feel?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is something, you know, intuitive eating is such a buzzword right now.
Yeah.
And we have what we teach is a skill called macro tracking. So the short little Cliff Notes version is that every human's body is designed to run on a balance of carbs, fat, protein. If we want optimal energy, if we want optimal health, what we need to learn is how much your personal body needs in terms of carbs, fat, protein. Now, the second I say the word macro tracking, there's like 80% of people listening that have a visceral reaction. They're like, I don't want to track my food, because for a lot of people, the end goal is intuitive eating. I just want to listen to my body. And my answer is that is a beautiful goal. I love intuitive eating. I have coaches in our program that teach intuitive eating. And right now, our bodies are speaking to us based off of habit, not intuition, right? If you've trained your body that every Wednesday we go out and we get a hamburger, well, come Tuesday night, your thought might be, well, I must be low in iron because I'm craving a hamburger. Like, that is not your body speaking to you. That is habit. So for people who want to eat intuitively, again, I am a huge fan. And I think for a lot of people, it's a beautiful goal. But right now we need 3 things. First, we need to understand how our personal body is designed to run, meaning that balance of carbs, fat, protein. We need to get better at eyeballing portion sizes, right? What we think a tablespoon of peanut butter is not a tablespoon of peanut butter. And then number 3, we need to do this long enough so that our brain literally gets wired for these new habits, and our brains and our bodies can start communicating. So I like to think of it as a training ground that we can then release to truly listen to our body. Because I mean, our bodies are incredible. We know this at this stage of life. We know this. Our body is capable of incredible things. But especially when it comes to nutrition, we've lived in an industry that had us cutting carbs, then binging, then cutting out fat, then binging, then overeating and undereating. And right now our body doesn't trust us. And a huge key to this process, especially in your 40s, 50s, 60s, the key to firing up your metabolism, the key to balancing your hormones, and the key to eating intuitively is we have to gain trust with our body through consistency first, and then we can release it and start listening.
That makes total sense. That if we've lived 40, 50, 60 years one way, there's going to be some need to reform some neural pathways.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to like stress, emotions, things that how many of us have tied food to reward or punishment or emotion, right?
Absolutely.
And so what I hear you saying is we basically have to build a completely different relationship, and we have to give our brains and our bodies time to get in sync with this change. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And I love that you used the word relationship, because one of the things we say that the work we do does is it heals your relationship with food.
Mhm.
Because the problem with the diet industry in general, and again, if we've been around 40, 50, 60 years, we know this better than most, is I always tell people, if you think if you make a list of every diet you've ever tried, and there's 150 diets on that list, you haven't actually tried 150 diets. You've tried 150 versions of one diet. And that diet is telling you what you can or can't eat. And when we understand, again, all of this is flowing with human nature. When we understand human psychology, there's a term called reactance. And reactance simply states that as humans, we want autonomy. We want the
Mhm.
power of choice. We don't want to be told what we
Yeah.
can or can't do. So we go on diets, we put on horse blinders. We say, I can't eat carbs. I can't eat fat. I can only eat these point systems. I can only eat these shake systems. And then we cave and we binge and we beat ourselves up about it. And the key to making this sustainable, when we talk about, as you beautifully put it, this relationship with food, when we talk about healing our relationship with food, the foundation of that is, number one, this trust that we were just talking about. But most importantly, it's by learning to stop labeling foods as good or bad or allowed or not allowed. Right. I love donuts. That's my thing. We used to have my whole business platform used to be based off of how to lose weight while still eating donuts. Are they the most nutritious food? Absolutely not. Am I going to eat 3 a day? No. But can I have a donut and still hit my weight loss goals? Absolutely. And because I've stopped shaming food or saying it's off limits, again, this is the snowball down a hill. This is about flowing with human nature. And when you talk about mindset, as you just brought up, this, especially 40, 50, 60, we have decades upon decades of these wired in beliefs that donuts are bad foods, right? I eat a donut and now I'm fat. So a lot of the work we do is not only the physical skill of learning how to diet without restriction, and it's around this mindset of understanding that there are no bad foods. There's nutritious and less nutritious, and releasing that shame, blame, and guilt around past diets, because it wasn't 150. It was really one diet and it wasn't designed to work.
And I think we vilify ourselves in the process, right? Like,
Absolutely.
it's hard for us to be successful when we are saying, I'm bad.
Yes. Yes.
Right? I'm bad for making that choice with the donut, for example. And I think, and maybe you can tell me what the science is on this, but it's like when we allow ourselves to find joy in the process, I know that lights up certain parts of the brain. So I think if we could shift from the shame and guilt, like you were talking about, and shift to finding the joy, like if I want a donut, which is funny you brought that up, because I literally just bought an apple fritter this week, and it's maybe once a year type of a thing. And I was like, I want a donut. So it takes me a couple days because they're so big, I cannot eat an entire apple fritter. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to enjoy this, right? I think that's what I hear you saying. If we can shift from the shame and the blame and the guilt, because I think our body responds to that, to joy, pleasure, and a treat. It's not the end of my life to have this donut, but what I hear you saying is that shift and that emotional energy that we're putting toward the food is actually part of the growing, changing process we need to make in order to find true health. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The way that we speak to ourselves, our inner monologue, is some of the most powerful work we can be doing for exactly the reasons we're saying. There's this common belief, especially as we get older, that, oh, if I'm not tough on myself, I'm not going to succeed. Right. And the game I like to play with people is like, think back to your favorite teachers growing up. Your favorite teacher they were probably strict with you. They probably set the bar high, but what they didn't do was shame, blame, guilt, and belittle you.
Yeah.
So why as adults did we decide that that's the key to success? Right. And then the other part of this is my running joke is we're all just glorified drug addicts. We're all just going around looking for dopamine hits, because if you trace anything back to the root, what we're looking for is a feeling, right? If you tell me I want to be super wealthy and I ask you why, is it because you want to log in your bank account and see a bunch of zeros? Or is it because you want the freedom, the security, the ability, the feeling of taking care of people you love, right? Everything in life is about a feeling. And it's the same thing here. When we go on a diet, a traditional restrictive diet, and it doesn't work, we don't emotionally separate and say, oh, that specific diet didn't work for me. We do exactly what you said. We go down the rabbit hole, the shame, the blame, the guilt, the beating ourselves up. And then we wonder why we have no motivation and we feel like crap and we don't want to do this again. But when we take baby steps, the key to this whole baby step concept, and you're going to feel like a dope when you first do it because we're not used to doing this. But when you take that baby step, let's say yours is 2 20-minute walks this week. The first time you take that 20-minute walk, you're going to throw yourself an internal party. You're going to, you know what? You are incredible. You didn't want to go for that walk. You did it. I'm so proud of you. And that's going to feel really hokey at first. But what we're doing is we're literally training our brain to release dopamine in that moment. So the next time we don't want to go for a walk, which we won't because it's wired in our brain, now our brain has proof of, wait a second, remember how good it felt afterwards? Let me get that little fix of dopamine that I'm chasing and go for my second walk. And all of this, again, I keep coming back to it. It's about flowing with human nature, and human nature states that we're designed to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And beating ourselves up, the shame, blame, guilt, that is pain. And we're going to avoid activities that cause that. Moving towards baby steps that release that dopamine and feel good, that's pleasure. And we're always going to keep that snowball rolling.
It's a hack, isn't it?
It is. It's like a brain and life hack.
She's like, go for it. Make yourself feel better. I dare you to feel better.
I love it. I love a little brain hack for healthy living.
It's like you're talking to do you want a little hit of dopamine? Do you want it?
I love that. I was just speaking with a PR manager the other day, and we were talking about designing a hook. And as you said that, I'm just like, ooh, hack your brain for healthy living. Like, I think you just gave me my hook.
Yay!
You now get commission.
That's awesome. I think we overcomplicate things, don't we? We think so hard about things. And some of us, to the mindset piece, which I'm really passionate about mindset, because I agree with you, Rachel. It's driving our life. It's driving our decisions. It's driving the choices that we make in our relationships, in our thought life, in the things we do or don't do. And the inner dialogue that you talked about, I feel like we don't even realize how much of that is going on. Like, we think, I want to look like this. I want to wear this size. I want to be this number. But you talked about the number on the scale not being necessarily the goal we should be aiming for. And as women, it's all about the numbers, right? We've been taught it's about the numbers. Right. So let's talk about that shift. And when you're talking about tracking your macros, it's not for the number, is it?
Not at all. None of this is ever, I mean, for some people, yes, there is a goal of a number on the scale, but there's a few things we need to understand. Number one, the scale, I mean, we could talk for 2 hours about the scale. The scale is not a reliable source for day-to-day information. Even if you are quote unquote perfect with your nutrition, whatever that means to you, if you're perfect, the scale is going to fluctuate as much as 1 to 6 pounds every single day. It becomes a mind game. It's great for long-term data. It is not there for day-to-day. So healing your relationship with the scale is a whole separate topic. And when it comes to weight loss, it is a slow, tedious, frustrating process, right? Like, I work in this field. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It goes slower than any of us want it to. So if your only measure of success is A to Z, right? I'm here, I want to be here. And that is my only measure of success. You are setting yourself up for failure. There is no world in which you're going to stick with it, because that path from A to Z has too many hills and valleys. It is up, it's down, it's backwards, it's forward, it's all over the place. So what we start to do is, again, all of this is baby steps. What's the first baby step goal, right? For some people, I'll tell you some interesting ones. There's better sleep. I mean, menopause, well, we can have a whole conversation about lessening the symptoms of menopause. For people with a larger amount of weight to lose, not having to use a seatbelt extender on the airplane is one that we hear a lot. Getting into a pair of jeans that you haven't worn since college. Things like how your clothes fit. You'll feel it in yourself, your energy, your confidence, the way that you're presenting in the world. Those things are going to show up much quicker and much more reliably than the number on the scale. And what happens for most people at some point is they hit their goal weight and they're like, oh, like, that's cool, but I don't even care about that anymore, because by the time I got there, my life had already unleashed in all these unexpected ways. So it's not a bad thing to have a goal number, as long as we understand that on that path to A to Z,
Yeah.
we have to have little baby steps in between to keep us motivated to get to the finish line, if we're going to call it that.
Mm-hmm. You said something interesting there. It's like by the time we get to that goal number, I think for a lot of people, we expect to feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the changes and the challenges that we've been experiencing along the way, our brain thinks this is still the goal, but we've changed in the process.
Absolutely.
Which is a
Absolutely.
beautiful thing, right? Because there's a multifaceted experience we're having with this idea of who we are. Do you find that the success actually comes with how a person perceives themselves and that number?
Absolutely. The running joke within my company is, people come to us and we're like, oh, they think they're here for weight loss, right? The weight loss is, to us, it's the simple part. Some simple doesn't always mean easy, but when you do it correctly, and I'm going to purposely use that word correctly, weight loss is math and science. It's human biology. It
Yeah.
works. If you stick with it, it will work. Period. Hard stop, mic drop, end of sentence. What the real work is, and this is where my coaches and I kind of giggle because we're like, oh, they think they're here for weight loss. The real work comes in the mindset training. It
Mm-hmm.
comes in the inner monologue. It's the belief systems. It's those deep wired stories that we've told ourselves for decades. So 99.9% of the time when women come to us, this is what we hear. I thought that I came to you to lose 20 pounds, but my entire life has shifted. Everything about me, I'm a different person than when I started. And yeah, I've lost the weight, but that almost feels insignificant at this point, because
Mm-hmm.
it's never about the weight. It's about, to go back to the start of this conversation, it's about our energy. It's about being comfortable in our skin. And most of all, it's about what we're attracting back in our life. And that happens somewhat immediately. It doesn't take getting to point Z. It happens getting to point B and C as you're taking the steps. So weight loss, again, like it's easier for me to say as someone who's done this for decades. It's harder to believe when you've been on the yo-yo diet train, but it
Mm-hmm.
truly is. When done correctly, it's not a guessing game. It will happen because it's human biology. It's that inner work that we're really here for. We just don't really know that yet.
Yeah. You know, we have so many paradigms around how we look. You know, I have daughters, and so I thought about it intentionally, like, how do I want them to perceive themselves? Not that I have control, but just my own inner dialogue being so not helpful. And that's probably the most negative input they've had, is me saying the things about myself that I've had the habit of saying. But it's interesting because I think having other women in the home, my daughters as adults, I look at them and I think they have a much healthier relationship with their bodies. And I'm glad that they have not as far to go. And right now, there's a little bit of an argument, especially in the social media world, around body positivity and this sort of thing. And so I think what I want to clarify is, we're not talking about justifying any type of body. We're talking about true health. And that's why the number disappears, right? And as women, I love that you remind us that our bodies fluctuate during the day and or the week, especially during menopause. And you're right, menopause is a big conversation. I've had it many, many times. But what is the thing about what you do that just gets you out of bed in the morning? What is so exciting about this, helping women 40 to 60? And I'm sure you help other people as well. But what is the thing that you're most passionate about?
Oh, this is such a good question. So our 12-week program is called Mindstrong Ignite. And Ignite was a very conscious choice of name, because I think especially as we get 40, 50, 60, we've spent a lifetime taking care of other people, right? If you have kids, especially, if you have grandkids, especially, but we've also worked with teachers and nurses and just women in general who tend to be givers at their own expense. So what typically happens is we hit this midlife period and suddenly we wake up and we're like, well, what about me? Right now, the kids are out of the house. The grandkids are being taken care of. Maybe we're retiring or we're just slowing down at work, or we're still working, but we have this moment of like, I've spent a whole life giving and I've lost myself.
Mhm.
And when we talk about I mean, I've been doing this for over 5 years. Like I get goosebumps still talking about it. When we talk about igniting your life, like that is not some cheesy, hokey saying. It's about stepping back into your power. Right now, I have a member in our program who's 72 years old. And she left me a message the other day. She started sobbing on the message. And she's like, I feel like I just got my life back for the first time at
Mm.
72. And then talk about what lights you up. I started crying listening to that, because if I can teach you that at 72, fantastic. If I can teach you that at 40, let's go, right? Because the moment that you start to realize it doesn't need to be this complicated. This is not a guessing game. It's not, oh, I wish I could have this life. Oh, I wish I could do this. When we understand basic human psychology, basic neuroscience, and basic nutrition, you are holding the reins to live that most aligned, unleashed life. And all we need is an educator to teach us that it's not a guessing game, it's logistical steps we can take. And the fact that I get to wake up every day and do that in the world and watch it happen in real time, like I I am so incredibly grateful for the work that I get to do, and just watching these women step into their power is the most beautiful thing.
So what I hear you saying is it is possible no matter where you're at on the journey. It's just a commitment to do the things that will get you there consistently.
100%. What we teach when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to mindset, the whole shebang, firing up your metabolism. This works if you're 20, this works if you're 80. It's human biology 101. It's personalized to the individual. There isn't a cookie cutter answer.
Right.
When we figure out what your body needs, it is personal to you. And it is math, it is science, it is human biology, human psychology, and it works for everyone.
Mm. I love the fact that there's a hope. There's a, it's not elusive. We're not talking about Bigfoot here, right? It's not Sasquatch. We can actually figure this out and find it. Do you,
Absolutely.
I think one of the things in terms of fitness and being a woman is this idea of a specific standard of beauty.
Mm.
You know, I'm imagining that what you do is tap into the beauty of the person that's in front of you, stripping away this idea that this body's not good enough, or this body isn't attractive enough, or this body isn't the right size. I would imagine that mindset piece is part of what comes up through the process of working with you. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that is spot on. I think, if we go back to where we started this conversation about like attracting like when it comes
Mhm.
to energy, yeah, we may see someone walk by in the street and think they're physically beautiful, but what actually attracts us to people is their energy, right? It's the
Mhm.
literal vibrating energy they're putting out in the world. So if you still have 50 pounds to lose, but you're showing up in the world, standing in your power, confident in your skin, we're seeing a lot of people in the entertainment industry now coming through, which is beautiful. They're standing there in their skin, in their power, and saying, this is who I am and I own it. And yes, we still want to worry about their health and hope they're taking care of their health, but the energy they're putting out in the world is attracting back millions. So to me, this multifaceted things happening at once, right? We want to get you healthy and take those steps. But this goes back to the conversation. It's not about A to Z. It's not once I get to Z, suddenly people will find me attractive and I'll find my perfect partner. It's about, as I take these steps, I am showing up in the world as a different human. And the people that are going to start coming into my life are going to be of a different literal vibration, because that's
Mhm.
what I'm attracting back now. And that has nothing to do with physical looks. That's all vibrating energy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. When you think about energy, you can go into a room, especially as women, and we're picking up what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or you meet someone and you instantly go, "Oh, I really like this person." Or you meet another person, you're like, "No, thank you."
Mm-hmm.
You haven't even said two words to them, right?
Right. And isn't it interesting? We know that animals can do this, right? We know that dogs can feel energy, but yet when we talk about humans feeling it, we think it's weird and woo-woo.
Yeah.
But that's why I love putting the science behind it, because as I like to say, it's not rainbows and glitter. This is quantum physics. This is how life is structured.
Hmm. And I think if we're thinking about health as a baseline, you know, health is multifaceted as well. I think we've minimized it to calories and food, right? But I think, and you've touched on this, you said the center of the pyramid is our mindset. Our health is mental, emotional, psychological, and physical. And to your point, our own energy is impacting the level of success or lack of success that we're experiencing. Do you find that when people try, but they don't believe they can, they get nowhere?
Absolutely. So my company's name, Mindstrong, comes from 2 points. Number one is the education point. Number two is the importance of this mindset work. And when I talk about mindset work, I'm not talking about standing in front of the mirror, beating my chest, saying, I am woman, hear me roar. It's about neuroscience, because there's a truth of the human brain that we cannot exist in a world where the internal and external don't match. So as we're learning a new skill, right? We're getting away from diet culture. We're doing something brand new, and it will work. What's going to happen is, if we're not addressing the mindset piece, and those stories are still replaying in our head saying, yeah, but I've lost 10 pounds before, and then I gained back 20. Yeah, but this is going to be another thing I tell my family about, and then I quit, and then I'm embarrassed. If those stories are still replaying, those are way more deep wired than this new work we're doing. So we're always going to self-sabotage right back to homeostasis, to our comfort zone. So when we talk about mindset work, we are talking about literally identifying and rewriting the old stories going on up here, and consciously wiring in these new habits and the new inner monologue that's supporting what we're doing. Because if you're not doing that work, which most traditional diets don't even talk about that part,
right.
It's science. You're absolutely going to self-sabotage, because your brain can't exist in a world where both are true.
I love that piece about alignment. It feels as though we're removing the emotion from the conversation, and we're replacing it with, this is exactly what it is.
Yes.
Right. And how the process that you bring is, how do we bring the external and the internal into alignment so that our mental, emotional, physical, psychological health becomes more and more balanced? Because you talk about, we think A to Z, I've got to get to this goal. But I think these peaks and valleys that you talked about really are the building blocks, because it's so easy to look at the goal and miss the process and what the beauty in that process that you're teaching people. And that's what I'm hearing, is these are the building blocks. The goal will come if you do this thing. But what about it's, how they say in your born date and your passing date, what are you doing with that dash? This feels like the same conversation to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you just said taking the emotion out of it. There is a very real time and place for emotion in this conversation, right? Food is a very emotional thing. Our bodies are a very emotional thing. And when it comes to the process, whether we're talking about the logistics of nutrition, whether we're talking about the logistics of rewiring our brain, those are very emotionless. We can remove the emotion, say, here are the steps to do this, and when you follow them, they will work. Now, does that mean we suppress our feelings? Does that mean that we're like, put your head down and do the work? Absolutely not. But a lot of the exercises that we do that are very important is, we talk about emotional eating a lot. And we do exercises where we identify, what time is it? What am I doing right now? What's the feeling I'm feeling? What am I tempted to grab? What am I choosing instead? Because this is one of the greatest paradoxes to me of humans. This is what I love about humans. We're such deep feeling individuals. We're all so individual, and we have so many feelings. And when you step back and look at us, we're all the same, right? There's a very scientific reason for why we make the choices we do. So if I'm feeling lonely, and I can see that on paper, and I can start to identify a pattern that every time I feel lonely, I reach for sweet foods, or I reach for salty foods. All the emotion behind that is valid, and we can have conversations about that. We can cry together. And now we have scientific data of, okay, if every time I feel lonely, I crave sweet foods, what if I start to swap out those Skittles for an apple? And now we've removed that emotional piece, and we've got our hands in the dirt in the scientific part of it. And I love how you phrase that, because that is so much of it. It's not saying emotions are bad. It's not saying they're not valid. It's saying, let's get those all out. Let's cry about them. Let's hug each other, and let's have faith. Let's have confidence in the fact that we are still humans who are wired a certain way, and we get to be in control of those wirings.
I love that. That's the most empowering part of the neuroscience piece of what we're talking about, because fundamentally, the whole thing is a neuroscience conversation.
It is.
I mean, because if we're going to change a habit, we have to change our mind. And that's a nice, deep, wide, fascinating conversation as well. But because this is one of those ongoing mind shifting, emotion tapping conversations, if you had to anchor in 3 things that, might help our audience, begin a process, or how you want to encourage them, what 3 things are coming up for you that you would like to share?
So number one, there's one of my favorite exercises that we do. We've referenced it a few times here. It's called do the bare minimum. So it's a feeling exercise. It's not a thinking exercise. You sit still, you close your eyes, you take a deep breath, and you ask yourself, what is the bare minimum I can commit to this week? And the second you identify that bare minimum, maybe it's tracking my food, which I'll talk about in a second. Maybe it's 2 20-minute walks. The second you think of it, that little inner monologue is going to kick in telling you why it's not enough. So just keep in mind, being an overachiever in this game ruins the game. You will feel it in your body. The second you start adding to it, you're going to feel tension. The second you feel at peace, that's your answer. And from there, the key, like we talked about, is to throw yourself that mini party when you do it to get that dopamine release. So number one, play the do the bare minimum game. Number two, if you want to jumpstart, no matter what people go on to do, anyone who works with us at any investment level, we always start them in the same place, because to make change, we have to shine the light of awareness. So if you download any kind of macro tracking app, the one I use is called MyFitnessPal. I'm not affiliated with them. They're just a common one. They're going to suggest macro numbers for you. Do not use them. They're not personal enough. But for the next 5 days, do your best to eat as you normally eat. That's easier said than done, because you're shining the light of awareness, and just input your food into the app. We just want to see, again, talk about that emotional distance. We just want data, right? This is going on whether we're aware of it or not. So doing our best to release the emotion around it. Just eat as you normally eat for 5 days and track your food. You'll be surprised how much knowledge you gain from that in terms of what's currently going on in your body. And the third thing is kind of just a bigger mindset piece to all this. And it's really wiping the slate clean. That if you remember a while ago, I said, if you've tried 150 diets, you haven't really. You've tried 150 versions of one diet. And that diet was never designed to be sustainable. Restrictive dieting, cutting out carbs, cutting out fat, point systems, shake systems, they are literally fighting against your human nature. And the forgiveness and release that we can experience when we fully, this is kind of a nutrition pun, when we fully digest that, and we can wipe the slate clean and say, you know what? It's not like, I'm a huge fan of radical personal responsibility, but it's not actually my fault that those didn't last. They weren't designed to. So now is the day that I draw the line in the sand and I say, this is it. This is the day I do something new. I stop dieting, I learn a skill, and I step into my power. That's more of just an understanding, a mindset shift, but it's one of the most powerful ones we can do to show our bodies and minds that we're ready for change that lasts.
I love that it's a skill that we can learn that removes a whole lot of the baggage.
Yes.
And
it takes the guessing game out of it. It's not, oh, I hope this is the thing that works for me. It's, are you a human? Do you have a heartbeat? Do you have a pulse? Yes, this will work for you. Whether you're menopausal, post, whatever, Hashimoto's, vegan, diabetic, you name it, this works for you. So there's no more hoping and praying. And is this the thing? When you stick with it, it works. It's human biology.
When you stick with it.
Yes.
There's the magic.
And that's why the mindset piece becomes so clear, because when you do both, you will stick with it, but we won't stick with it if we're not addressing that inner monologue, as we talked about.
That's amazing. So, Rachel, how do people find you and your resources?
The best place to find me is on our website, mindstrongfitness.com. There you can set up a call, you can look through our programs. My book that you mentioned at the beginning is called Becoming Mindstrong, The Truth About Health, Fitness, and the BS That's Holding You Back. That's available on Amazon. And if you're listening or watching this, I'm assuming that you're a podcast and YouTube person. I also have a podcast by the same name, Becoming Mindstrong. And that's a really great place to just dive in and absorb a lot more of these topics that we touched on today.
Mm-hmm. You have a YouTube as well?
Yes, it's not as active as the podcast, but we do throw them on there when when I remember to keep it active.
I know, it's right. It's like edit and create and put, and you're like, where did we put that? Where do we need to put that? Do I have to put it there?
Steps.
Well, Rachel, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today and for sharing your passion and your expertise with us as women and continuing to build the conversation around true health, mental, physical, and emotional health, and how important it is for us to begin to acknowledge ourselves and take time for ourselves and to believe that we can be healthier. I really appreciate the practical way you removed the veil of what we have believed fitness and health to be. And I really appreciate your perspective and your wisdom today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Yes. Friends, today, if you find us on YouTube, if you just look down below those links that Rachel shared, they're going to be right there for you. And if you're on a podcast platform, you can go to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 353. The show notes will be there as well. Friends, this is a conversation that I look at it like a diamond, right? I talk to different people and I have different guests because we all have a perspective and a gift. Each one of my guests has a purpose and a passion that they bring to the table. And this is another piece in that process of us understanding the beauty of this body we've been given and what it is capable of, what it has done, what it is doing, and what it will continue to do, and how important it is that we strengthen the base of our foundation of health so that we can continue to serve in the world the way that we're meant to serve. Health, if you don't have your health, you really don't have anything. So, as Rachel said, play that game. What's the smallest, littlest thing you can do? Not the biggest thing. Where can you start? What can you do with what's in your hands now? Thank you so much for joining us today. I do encourage you to share this conversation with your friends. Read the book. Do the things together, because doing these things in community can be very, very powerful. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. I look forward to sharing more inspirational people, conversations, and resources with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.